I want to get at an issue that I know shows up a lot in town halls, does not show up a lot in Washington coverage, and that is housing policy. And I sit there and say it because it was one of these. I love to do this whenever I'm with members of Congress. I'm like, hey, tell me an issue that comes up all the time that none of us
Yeah.
ever cover. And last cycle, to a member was Republican and Democrat. It was constantly, 4 years ago it was the opioid, and it was actually about 8 years ago it was the opioid epidemic. That was the story before Washington types like myself caught on, right? Housing is now housing both affordability and availability. You are representing an area that everybody wants to move to. And I have no doubt there are just as many people that think, hey, we need more housing, but not in my backyard.
Yeah.
Don't mess up my community. I love my community. We don't need new townhouses and we don't need this. And um, what is this to me? How much of it is it a state issue and how much of it is it a federal issue? And I feel like you're in a unique spot because you've probably been focused on housing
Mhm.
policy in both places you've been. And now that you've seen and understand, frankly, what's possible on the state level and what isn't, and what's possible on the federal level and what isn't, what what should our housing give me a framework of what you'd like to see us start to work on when it comes to housing policy, and how does the federal government help your district with housing affordability?
Yeah. Thanks for bringing this up. It's actually why I'm on financial services and because I wanted to be on the housing subcommittee and I've served now. This is my third year. It's been frustrating because the Republicans have not prioritized this issue the way that I believe it needs to be prioritized. It can't just be solved with tax incentives. This is about huge, bold investments at the federal level, and states like Colorado just simply cannot take that burden on. And so when we are in a position where we're not actually even willing to have the conversation about what these investments look like, it is continuing to put us decades behind where we need to be. And there are a ton of opportunities right now when we look at new technologies that we could invest in. I visited the first 3D printed home in Colorado last year, and it was, we have the opportunity to start building homes more affordably, but we need those local permitting. We need to address the barriers at the local level with
So there is
permitting.
local
That is a
regulation issues, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we can
Okay.
incentivize with the right. So, we have a bill that says if you're taking these federal grants, you actually have to identify your local policies that create barriers for housing development. And just by
Mhm.
having these local communities identify the barriers, it's a very small step forward. But then they're
Mhm.
thinking about it and they're actually being forced to look at the housing policies that they have in place or that don't increase the supply. So there are things that we can do like that are small. We have bipartisan
Mhm.
bills in that area, but we need bold investments. We haven't done that since the
What
90s.
does the
And
investment look like? Tell me what that's what I hear. What is that? What is the investment? Is it land acquisition? Is it incentives for developers? What does this look like?
this is why these issues are hard to cover, just like the opioid epidemic, because they're very complicated and it really
Right.
is an all hands on deck approach. So you have to give the carrots and the incentives for changes at the local level with policies. You have to give the federal dollars for land acquisition, for
Mhm.
actually building some of these upfront costs. The last time that we've done that was in the 90s at the
Mhm.
federal level, and so all of these buildings had a 30-year basically they had a timeline over 30 years where they would be held for affordable housing, and most of these are actually coming up right now and being bought privately. And so you're going to see the limited amounts that we've invested in at the federal level,
Mhm.
those too are going away, and that was decades ago. So we're dealing with it's the housing crisis from 2009,
Mhm.
where home builders went out of business and they never caught back up to where they were,
Mhm.
and we had stagnation during that time. And then you have unfortunately what's happened, just the lack of building houses for decades to follow. And now we're
Mhm.
deporting everybody that we need in critical areas like construction. So
Right.
and tariffs. You have the costs going up again, and we have we were starting to stabilize with our with our rating here in the United States, and making sure that inflation was starting to go down, and some of these things that we were starting to recover from the global pandemic, and
Mhm.
unfortunately now it's going the opposite direction because of Trump's failed policies. So there is a lot that we have to do at the federal level, and it does come down
Mm.
to money, and that's why Republicans are unwilling to have that conversation. And we didn't even
Um,
talk about housing insurance policy. I mean, places
right.
like Colorado, we're seeing skyrocketing prices for
But
insurance in
Congresswoman, it's
places.
not just Colorado. This is now a 50 state phenomenon now,
Yeah,
right? With extreme weather. Um, I had an issue at my house a few years ago. We got one of these microburst storms. It was something like 8 inches of water, rain in an hour, right? It was no, and I remember talking to the real estate adjuster, and I was trying to see if my policy was going to cover it. And he literally, the adjuster said to me, um, we don't cover water. I said, what do you mean you don't cover water?
yeah.
He said,
I was told the
well,
same thing.
you're just sitting there going, well, that's like nine. I mean, I don't live on a, I thought I lived
Yeah,
far
they
enough
say they
away
don't
from the
cover
river.
outside water coming in.
Yeah. Right. And I said, now then the guy goes, he goes, did your sump pump work? And I said, yes. And he goes, oh. And I went, oh, so what you're saying is if I could commit insurance fraud and say my sump pump failed, then you cover the problem, which of course, great. So now we're encouraging people to lie to insurance adjusters. And of course, but this to me, since governments won't act, the insurance industry is going to act for them. And it feels like, I hate to say, it looks to me, it's almost as if government leaders are simply waiting for the insurance industry to put a gun to their head before they'll act.
I mean, these are one of those issues where it does take federal action on, that they'll say, well, the states regulate this. Well, there are no options in many places in Colorado, and there's going to be fewer options for insurance coverage. We have people right now in the mountain communities who are selling their homes because they're worried that they're not going to be able to sell it in the next 5 years because people can't actually prove that they can have insurance coverage for their homes. And so, this is an urgent need right now, and this is something that we need to come together on. The flood insurance program, there's plenty of areas where it's been, I don't think it's been prioritizing the right things, and we can learn from
Right.
the mistakes, but we need to have a federal option here.
I was just going to say, I mean, what part of this do you think it's fair for the federal government? Essentially, the federal government's probably going to have to figure out how to cover catastrophic something, right?
Well,
If
they're
if Medi
dismantling FEMA too, so that's
well,
great.